Hey there everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide, is that book worth reading of a second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? Well, that's what we're here to decide. So the first thing some of you may note is the obvious change of scenery, of course. It wasn't really planned or anything. I'm just undergoing a massive storm right now. I'm kinda in between waves at the moment. So occasionally you may see me stop as a big roll of thunder goes through. And because of that, you won't be seeing my pup Vegas. She is terrified of thunderstorms. So she will be hiding under the bed for pretty much all day. Till she decides to come out and really has to go to the bathroom. This one here. Did you get it? This one here, for better or worse, has absolutely no fear whatsoever. So, and I don't just mean of thunderstorms, I just mean in general. Can I help you? As you can tell, she's been taught well by the other one. She's just not normally big enough to get away with it. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the book that we started here, since I've explained why we're here and what we're doing. The book that we're here to review is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Congratulations to all those who have guessed it, although by the point this goes up, it'll probably be no one, because no one comments on my videos anymore. You guys comment, it's great. To get started, The Host is a young adult novel published on May 6th of 2006, and was written by the infamous Stephanie Meyer of Twilight fame. The book was met with lukewarm reception, more or less, from what I remember, and it wasn't really until the movie adaptation was released in 2013 that really any attention was brought to the novel, and the movie adaptation was received mostly negatively. I remember kind of watching it as a kid. Well, a kid. It's only like 10 years ago, so technically I was a kid as compared to who I am now, but again, can I help you? But otherwise, it's needless to say that it didn't hold up well. I remember it being really, really boring. I'm not going to balance you the entire review like this. Just so we're clear. The book itself is currently a standalone work within its own little world. Although Stephanie Meyer has said on occasion that she intends to write this as a trilogy. She has even gone so far as to name the sequel books, with the second in the trilogy going to be named The Seeker, and the third being named Souls. Souls. The Soul, my bad. The last time I recall her saying and the last thing I could find about her saying anything about the sequels of the book was in 2011, where she claimed that she had her outlines done and she was working on them. However, considering that there is no sequels that I could find, I'm going to go ahead and guess that maybe that plan ended up dead in the water, so to speak. So, without further ado, I shall give you this report card. Now, onto the cover of this book. The cover of this book is serviceable. I mean, it doesn't really say a lot about what the book is about. Just picture what I assume to be Melanie's body super close to the camera on a... Again, can I help you? Yes, I love you, but I'm doing something right now. On sort of a, looking at it from an upraised position. Now, as a cover, that could work if Stephanie Meyer had leaned more into the horror elements that this novel presents, as you can kind of make out the slight silver halo in the iris that denotes that a soul is there, of this soul specifically being called the Wanderer, and the odd angle of the face, as well as just how close it is, gives a very unnerving feeling. It sort of just breaches into the uncanny valley enough that you look at it and you think, something is wrong. However, having read the book and knowing what's it about, I would just say at the moment it's serviceable. It's fine enough. I think it'll get you into the book, but I think it's one of those when you look back later, you're just kind of like, okay. So really, that's all I have to say about it. Now, on to the synopsis of this book. The best way I can describe this book is imagine someone took Invasion of the Body Snatchers and decided, I'm going to make this a YA romance novel. because that is exactly what this book is about. So basically, this book takes place from, honestly, an interesting twist where the perspective that the book offers is that from that of the invading species. Wanderer, who is a soul in this case, is put into a young girl named Melanie Strider's body. Now, she's... You good? Now, Melanie Strider is one of the last wild humans that exist in this world, at least as far as they know. And they believe that by putting Wanderer into this body, Melanie Strider, that Wanderer will be able to pull out Melanie Strider's memories of where any other humans can be. Because they know for sure at least one other human was with her. However, as they go on, Melanie refuses to just fade away like a lot of other humans do when they get implanted. Will you let me do this? I thought I was going to have an easier time doing this because Vegas is going to be getting in my face every time I so much as motion backwards. But you are making this 10 times harder than it has to be. So anyways, Wanderer is expected to work with the character known as the Seeker as she pulls memories from Melanie Strider's body to find the last bits of humanity. Now, the reason this has its weird thing is because Melanie, unlike a lot of other human hosts, isn't fading away with time. In fact, she seems to be as present as she always is from the moment she gets put in to later. In fact, she almost seems to be getting stronger at points, but we'll talk about that later. But anyways, after a bit, Wanderer, after sifting through memories and having a trouble basically disassociating what Wanderer wants from what Melanie's body wants, decides to work with Melanie and go back to find her handsome hunk, Jared, and her little brother, Jamie. Her little brother, Jamie. I remembered. I should say something about how important Jamie becomes. Anyways, and that's pretty much where the book takes off. Now, to get on to the review, and I'll start with admitting something. When I first began this book, I was surprised by how much I liked it. I thought it was an interesting twist to focus entirely on the invading species perspective throughout the book. Watch as their justifications for their invasion are laid out, and then we watch as they get challenged. And we see the somewhat alien culture of the souls and their contrast to humanity. One of the things that is kind of interesting is that souls don't really have a memory. They sort of meld onto the species they're put into. The reason humanity is so unique to them is because they're often taking over species that either don't have emotions, like the spiders, as they put, which are incredibly smart, but they have kind of a reptile brain, more or less. They don't really feel emotions or see colors the way humans do. Humanity is interesting for them because humanity is one of the most emotionally driven. They have their own souls, for the lack of a better word. And it's interesting to see how it's so hard for souls to separate their own emotions from the emotions of their hosts. So it was pretty interesting watching as Wanderer slowly accepts more and more being what is effectively Melanie Strider. It creates a interesting contrast throughout the book where it's hard to determine what Melanie wants and what Wanderer wanted. Where Wanderer later becomes known as Wanda as her human name, just to be clear. So if you hear me interchange them, that's the reason why. So it was definitely an interesting prospect from that angle. And I was genuinely enjoying myself for good portions of this book, and I thought maybe I had let myself be influenced by the popular culture, the internet trend to hate on the book prematurely before I've given it a fair chance. The Twilight series may be Meyer's most well-known work, but even then when I read it, I found the first book mostly just boring than offensively bad, and it was only in the later books that I thought, okay, the Twilight series is bad, as Eclipse is basically even more boring, and then no. You know what? I'll go on my Twilight rant later. So when this book works, it really works. The first 78 pages, I had absolutely no complaint about this book, worth really writing down. In fact, my first note overall for this book was a genuine compliment, and I was completely ready to come onto this channel, record a video, and talk about how I was wrong to put this in a Garbaugust poll. How wrong I was to put it on that shelf of books where I know they aren't good, and I only got them so I can talk about them on this channel. And then the book kept going. And going. And going. going. Let me retry that. Because there are a lot of issues with this book that kept cropping up the longer Myers kept her story going. The most egregious of all is that she just fills it with pointless things. There were a lot of things in there. Seems like Meyer had almost no concept of what was important with the story and what could have just been left out. And it feels like she took a book that should have been at most 400 pages long and stretched it to an additional 200 pages. And this has the added downside of ruining otherwise great and tragic scenes. The best example I can point to is chapter 31 of this novel. During this chapter, Wanderer, who by this point has been going by Wanda for a little bit, has been with the human group for a fair amount of time. We never get a hard limit, but that's for good reason within the story, it's justified. And she has more or less begun to integrate with their society, and has made her own social circle of friends who have come to completely overlook the fact that she's an alien invader, and appreciate her as Wanderer, not Melanie, ready to defend her from those who would want to kill her outright. One of those people was a man named Walter, who is currently dying of cancer, and is on his last strand of life, basically. Wanderer goes to be with him in his final hours as his cancer finally catches up with him, and he's just unable to move out of bed. Now, in this scene, Stephenie Meyer had a great opportunity to just emotionally gut-punch her character, and by extension, us, the audience, who are watching everything through this character's perspective. Wanda is experiencing true loss for the first time. Souls have a perfect society, and they themselves are practically immortal, barring an accident, easily being able to be switched between a different host when their previous host body dies. And as it's noted several times before, each of the host bodies they've lived in before have very long lifespans, with humans being among the smallest they've been in so far. So Wanda has never truly had to deal with the loss of a real friend, and is someone she really cares for. One of the few people who have come to accept her for who she is. But during this scene, it's revealed that Walter is so out of it, he's seeing Wanda as his wife Gladys, who was taken over by the souls, and that the humans, lacking the proper medical treatment, can't save him. But even Walter himself would rather die than become possessed by a soul where he would get the proper medical examination, basically. To the point that they have to end Walter's life by overdosing him on morphine in order to spare him the pain. The way Meyer sets this up is that Wanda is finally going to realize just how wrong what her people are doing to humans. And this is ultimately going to be the turning point from where Wanderer turns from sort of defected to flat out, I'm on the human side. And for the most part, Meyer tries to treat the scene later when it finally ends as that's what it was about. It doesn't really work, because Meyer just couldn't help herself. Instead of making this chapter focused on that scene, instead of really hammering home the emotions of the characters and the tragedy of what's happening, Meyer keeps distracting from it. She interrupts with her antagonist, the Seeker. She interrupts it with the love interest who keep making appearances. And then she interrupts it with an attempt on Wanda's life by the a-hole character of the humans. All of this which just isn't needed to make the scene work. It's all just there as needless distraction to drive further home things that have already been very firmly established. It's just wasted potential. And that's ultimately the best way to describe this book. Wasted potential. A book that could have been an interesting introspection on what it could have meant to be human, faults and all, is kind of just forced into this box of tropey young adult romance. Honestly, I'd go out on a limb here and say that for the most part, Jared, the main love interest, for a bit, it's just kind of a weight on this book that only serves to bring it down. Not only is he really hard to like for good portions of it, even when he's supposed to be past the point of wanting to kill Wanda out of anger for taking over Melanie's body, and is actually trying to get along with Wanda. Like, he even outright states at one point, again, past the point where he wants to kill our main character, that Melanie's body belongs to him. She does say soul too, but it's that incredibly possessive language that got me right there. It's sort of like in those shows where the driving point home to show the husband is controlling is when he says, I married you, so you belong to me. That is basically what he says in this scene. But that's not completely fair. Every character is just bland. Melanie, despite being advertised as a main character alongside Wanderer, is such a codependent leech on Jared that even the book itself calls her out on the fact that she has no purpose without him around. She doesn't even try to talk to Wanda or talk through Wanda or get her body back. If Jared is not being mentioned in the scene, she's done. She has no point to exist, effectively. Jamie is just your everyday innocent younger sibling stereotype. Kyle is just the a-hole who comes around at the last moment, while Maggie and Shannon, despite being Melanie's family, and one of them even being the reason that Melanie Strider was caught and turned into Wanderer, have literally no presence in the book at all. Most of the other humans, including the one Wanda claims are her friends, get about a single personality trait if they're lucky. And most of them tend to be, this is who the character is dating. Can we just stop and talk about that for a minute? What is with Stephenie Meyer and her age gaps? Can she not write a romance where there isn't some kind of age gap that makes the reader go, ooh? Because it's just... okay, so I was willing to wave off Wanda's thousands of year old age with her hubby, Ian, because Wanda herself states that age is a different matter for souls. While they themselves, as the little worms that they are, can live for thousands upon thousands of years, they more or less get reset emotionally when they're put into new host bodies. Wanda, for all intents and purposes, is a 1,000-year-old soul. But when she's put onto Melanie, she's at best late 20s in her maturity. And that works in the same way that, although a lot of people joke about it, it still sort of works with vampire on human romances. Yes, it's weird if you think about it, that this 200-year-old vampire is dating a woman who's like 20, when you compare their ages, she's literally less than a toddler to him. I was willing to put that aside. The main one that caused me to throw up a little in the back of my mouth is, unfortunately, the main driving one. Melanie and Jared. Melanie is 17. Jared is 26. That is almost a 10-year age gap between one character who is a minor, where the relationship begins with a non-consensual kiss. This was way worse than Edward and Bella, because again, at least Edward had the excuse of being an immortal vampire that's supposedly stuck at the age of 17 forever. But that's only one of the romances in this book. It's actually worrying for me because I don't think there was a single romance in this story that does not contain an age gap of some kind. At one point, a pair of super minor side characters named Wes and Lily are stated to be in a relationship. Only for Lily to make a point to say, well, you could say that he's too young for me, but I guess that stopped mattering now, huh? And well, I could take that to mean like, she's maybe 28 and he's 24. An age gap that could have some people raising an eyebrow, but is at least acceptable. With Meyer, I'm unfortunately willing to believe that Wes is, again, 16 and Lily is in her late 20s, because that is all the age gaps in this romance. When Wanda is placed in a new body that is described as just turning 18 in maybe a few weeks and looks 2 years younger than it is, ends up in a relationship with Ian, who's supposed to be in his mid-20s. It's gross. And let's factor in there for a moment, while I'm on the subject of endings, this is another example of Maya ruining an amazing setup despite herself. This book had a chance to end in a genuinely bittersweet way that added a real sense of tragedy and heartbreak. But it was fitting because our character, who's been struggling with her own sense of identity through large portions of the book, seems to finally root herself down and make a firm stance on something, making both an altruistic choice that is also rooted in her own selfish desire of identity. I think had this book ended on page 598, I would have been sitting here saying that this book has a lot of flaws, but ultimately, it's a good book. Unfortunately, due to who Meyer is, I realized right away that she wouldn't have the balls to go through with this, for lack of a better word. So when this ending is overwritten with an ending that gives everyone a happy ending despite the dismal circumstances, it takes so much out of what could have been a great ending. Meyer, you've got to learn to take chances. And ultimately, I think that's what held this book back. Meyer almost felt afraid to step out of her comfort zone. She's coming off the massive heels of Twilight fame, having just published Eclipse, if I'm not wrong, and so she has a set brand. There was so much here she could have done to been great, could have been interesting, if Meyer had been willing to take that chance. Instead, it feels like she just fell back on what she was already comfortable with and let all the potential go to waste on what she could have done. I mean, why would I want to see an interesting villain who threatens our character, representing the dark side of the society that Wanderer holds up as a paragon to the barbaric human nature, before ultimately revealing that the villain is a reflection of who Wanda could have been? Why do that when Maya could just use the antagonist in the lightest sense possible before being overcome off-screen with no assistance from our protagonist? And all of these interesting facets that could have aided to the story really help that theme of self-discovery and identity. It's just told to us by a character who literally just entered the story. Why would I want to see a tale where an alien invader who's justified to herself that she was making Earth and humanity a better place with her species' presence, come to realize that humanity has its own vibrant and loving culture outside of what the souls understand, by making friendships and forming pseudo-familial bonds with people when Maya could just make the focus two hunky boys fighting over our protagonist's body and mind, with side characters who are far more interesting eventually just taking a back seat in the latter half of the book. Why would I want to see a bittersweet ending that may not have everyone smiling, but in the end ultimately says a profound thing of being willing to die for those you love, and understanding that living the way you want, no matter how short, is worth the sacrifice? When Maya could just override that all for a mushy happy ending where no sacrifices ever have to be made by our characters, and everyone lives happily ever after. This book could have been good. It could have been great, but it wasn't. It was held back by an author that felt like she refused to leave her comfort zone. And because of that, what could have easily been a 7 or an 8 out of 10 is only about a 5 out of 10. I don't really think there's much else I can say about this book that I haven't already. The book had the potential to be great, but was held back by multiple choices that the author chose to make. The book could have easily been 200 pages shorter at the minimum, but Maya wastes a lot of your time describing pointless scenes that have nothing to do with the overall plot or narrative, but always sidelines things that are much more important. It had the chance to have a great, bittersweet ending that said something, but instead chose the safest possible way out instead, and in the end we're mostly just left with a bland, boring book instead. There's the question of whether or not it deserves Mount Doom. Is unfortunately, yes. I don't have Mount Doom here. It doesn't fit where I am, so. I suppose I could have put it right here. Too late now. Because it really isn't worth the read. I wouldn't recommend avoiding this book. I really wouldn't. It is somewhat worth the read the first time through, because if you don't know where you're going. But unfortunately, I think Meyer just wasted a lot of that potential that she had, what could have made a great book, and again, chose to make the safest possible book ever, that it's just sort of a disappointing mess overall. In the end, you won't gain anything by reading this, you'll just have read a book. And so if you want to just read a book for no other reason than to read a book, I guess read this book. But if you want to read a book for any other reason, don't pick it up. It really does waste its potential, and that's one of the unforgivable sins of a book. Plus, seriously, with the age gaps, please stop with the age gaps. I cannot stress enough how much I hate the age gap she pushes in almost all of her works. It's so weird. Honestly, though, I would go so far to say this book is probably just Twilight. Just switch some names around and it's Twilight. Jared is Edward, Ian is Jacob, Melanie is Bella. I guess that's all I got to say. I hope you guys are ready for the next one, because it's heading into the final frontier. Will you guys guess what it is? Comment here or on my TBR video to guess. That being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones. See you later, everyone.